order to be successful in life, you have to cross a jungle. Or you could stay on the other side of the jungle and not cross the jungle. But if you choose to cross the jungle has all sorts of things that can do you harm and bite you and everything along those lines. And so the best way to do that is to go into that with people who can see things differently and watch themselves and struggle to make it to the other side. And then what I've discovered along the way is that it's always a struggle, and I enjoy being in the jungle. I don't want to get to the underside. I don't want to get out. So that's what it feels like to me.
The number one principle is don't believe anything, think for yourself. And now let's go through a process of what is true together. But we can't stop that with ego. We can't let that barrier stand in our way. So we're going to live in a culture in which we can do that.
I think the greatest tragedy of mankind is people holding on to wrong opinions that could so easily be rectified, and that's doing them harm because they're making wrong decisions. So how do you collectively do that? Well, the answer is by everybody seeing everything and seeing how others see, they begin to gain those perspectives. They also get an appreciation for the other way of seeing. It used to be that everybody would drive each other crazy. Your brain works in one way, my brain works in another. Maybe I see big picture, you see detail. Right. Maybe I'm creative, maybe you're reliable. We drive each other crazy. When you start to realize that people are actually seeing in those ways, and that's a valid way of seeing, and that I need you and you need me, and how to put together the team, as you're asking about, it gives you the evidence base. It's okay to be different. It's very important to know what people are like. Yet most organizations don't want to go there. By knowing what people are like and having them part of the process of knowing what they're like, there's better understanding, better communication, and also, of course, you can make better teams because nobody has all that's needed to be successful. We need each other to play different roles, and the ability to do that by knowing what people are like is enhanced. Every time I made a mistake, they became painful mistakes, but with time, I realized that reflecting on those mistakes would give me gems. What I would do is I'd say, why did I make that mistake? And I would learn from that mistake. And I'd write down a rule. So what was helpful for me is I put that rule, I wrote these principles down. Those principles that I wrote down, I then put into algorithms, in other words, equations. And what I learned by being able to do that is if I took my decision criteria, those principles, and then I tested them back through time, I gained a perspective that was fantastic. I could test them in back 100 years. I could test them in different countries, and I would learn how those rules work. And by putting all those rules together and then having these algorithms, the computer could replicate my thinking, but it could actually think better than I could because what it would do is it could process more information, it could process it faster, and it could process it less emotionally. So it was like having a GPS that was next to me while I was also making my decisions, like you're driving in a car and you have both operating. And to have that next to me was, invaluable. It would learn, I would learn, and together we built that. What I believe is that everything happens over and over again through history. The world operates like a machine. It happens over and over again. And that if you can sort of go above yourself and your circumstances and look down at yourself within your circumstances within a historical perspective, and then have agreed upon principles. Principles are how to handle things that happen over and over again. By having that, it's helpful, and ours are just oriented around this idea of meritocracy, so it allowed us to have an independent point of view while being not 100% certain and, to be defensive, and it allowed us to play that well. A big shift in terms of going to the notion of what do I do with my money. Let's say you have a lot of liquidity and the world has lots of liquidity. Today, the world has lots of liquidity. The question is, what are its choices? And what do those choices look like? And then you put your money. So you produce a lot of money around, a lot of liquidity, and then say, do you stop buying U.S. bonds when you have, or do you stop buying Japanese bonds when you have no interest rate and a currency risk? So when do you stop buying? Well, it's when you have confidence in ultimately when it's driven to something else. At some point, you get a move toward inflation. If there's a move toward, like, I want to hold inflation assets, then you come into problems. Until you don't have that move to move toward inflation assets, you have a capacity for a lot of the buying there, and so the timing. Can you go to what you're like? Can you go to your mistakes? Can you go to your weaknesses? Right? Can you go to other people's mistakes and weaknesses? Some people, because of an ego barrier, can't do that. And so if they don't recognize their own mistakes, their own weaknesses, or others' mistakes and weaknesses, what the root cause, what they're like, because of ego barriers, if they can't go there, they're going to repeat those mistakes. They're going to have them over and over again.